Finally, Jaime and Fuego has come back to review a new Sai King story. Fairy tale, baby.
Have you checked the children? You're a little mad sometimes.
Hi, I'm Chucky. Wanna play?
Sometimes that is better.
You're gonna need a bigger boat.
Long days and pleasant nights, fellow travelers along the path of the beam. I am known on this level of the tower as Jaime and Fuego, and if you believe you, join me here for a bit of palaver on Hail to Stephen King. That is Reezy, obviously, Bevenitos, and welcome to the horror show. So very stoked to have you here. I've been doing this program for over 300 episodes for over 6 crazy years at this particular point, but so very stoked anytime, just as I recently was with a short story that unfortunately I was relatively underwhelmed by, but it is a significantly different sort of situation when we have a brand new Sai King novel proper, that being fairy tale. And so I let this one simmer a little bit more so, you know, than I typically have, like with you know, later elevations, some of these like shorter novellas that I was able to crush in like a day and then give like immediate thoughts. This is a little bit different, and shout out to Dan Corey from the Hail to Stephen King Facebook group. And he was like, let it simmer, you know, let it you know, kind of cultivate, so to speak. And I will say that I was initially very big on this book, and yet I have kind of leveled out, not where it's like a Billy Summers or an Institute level of me just being underwhelmed, so to speak, but yeah, this is a lot of callbacks, tons of them, in fact, and you know, it's really King reveling in nostalgia. I was when initially trying to film this and just kind of giving it a little bit more, you know, time to kind of you know, correlate and, you know, simmer and all that sort of stuff. There is a great quote from Bad Religion, my favorite band: nostalgia is an excuse for stupidity. It's nothing of that particular nature, but they are my favorite band and I love them wholeheartedly. And there is a lot of just looking back at other things, and yet I kind of feel like King already did a lot of looking back. Bottom line, I enjoyed this book. It's very much the same bit that I kind of felt with Barbarian when we were reviewing it for the horror show recently, in the fact that I appreciated so much of its daring, just ambitiousness, I guess, but it was really not bringing anything particularly new to the table. And yes, I love Sai King. I've got pages of notes, you know, as I always do. But yeah, man, I mean, this most definitely, like, it had everything from Mr. Harrigan's Phone, which is about to be a brand new film on Netflix, but it also had major vibes of The Talisman, you know, with Charlie and this young protagonist. And then also, maybe more so than anything, I got Dark Tower 5 vibes. And this is not spoilery on my end, guys. This is just, you know, more so first impressions and evaluations and so on and so forth. So, yeah, the fact that Wolves of the Kala, the 5th Dark Tower book, which I have mixed feelings about, a lot of peeps, especially Tower Junkies, are big-time fans of it. That one in particular was a celebration of storytelling, and most notably fairy tales. And this does the same thing, in the fact that, I mean, I guess Ray Bradbury's Something Wicked This Way Comes, and, you know, Lovecraft, that's not like fairy tales per se, but it goes back and just kind of calls those out, uses them as a inspirational sort of thing, and this is all impressions. I have still not even gone into, you know, any of my just vibes or recanting of the storytelling, but I felt the echoes, man. I felt the echoes of so many different things, and so I mentioned Talisman, Harrigan's Phone, Wolves of the Kala, big time Dark Tower, and then I guess it's fine if you claim that you're getting some sort of inspiration from stuff like The Hunger Games or, you know, George R.R. Martin. Him and Steve are friends, and so that's a little bit different. And like, our protagonist even calls that out, as far as he's like, wow, I'm in this fantasy world, and I'm encountering things that are so similar to what I've read and experienced, you know, on a small box, i.e. television, and so I feel like, once again, I'm veering more so into the negative than is properly necessary. And so Charlie, our main character, our kid, so he's a little bit older than Jack from The Talisman, and so that is a definite distinction in the fact that, yes, it's another coming-of-age story. Yes, there's a lot of underdeveloped stuff in this, in my estimation, in the fact that, yes, there is like a youthful longing for a girl that we hear a little bit about early on, back when we have, Charlie in his actual, like, real life before he jumps into this other world. We also have, like, a friendship that I feel like is talked about, and it's kind of made to seem more impactful. It's somebody who Charlie was going around and being, wreaking havoc with, being nasty, being shitty, in all of that regard. So, as Jeff, properly called me out about recently, I am most definitely jumping around. But as far as, like, overall impressions, just like with Barbarian, it had a lot of key hallmark aspects that I appreciated, that I respected, but it, like, aside from Revival, and maybe later to a smaller, like, lesser sort of degree, like, Revival is legitimately the freshest and most interesting thing that I think Sai King has done in the last, like, 10, 15 years. And so, very similar to, like, with The Institute, Billy Summers, I mean, yeah, that was kind of exciting because of the fact that, Contract Killer and, whatever. But, Fairy Tail echoes a lot of stuff that he has done previously, and then very deliberately calls back to a lot of stuff that he loves and holds in, like, high regard. And so it's definitely not bad. It's not like Sleeping Beauty's, like, level of disappointment, but it is most definitely a book that I appreciated, but as the familiarity really just became far more apparent, most notably as, and not even familiarity with, like, King himself. It was more so as we got into the fantasy aspect, the fact that, yeah, he was deriving so much inspiration, and I was like, oh, I have seen this previously, and it's fun that King is doing, like, giants and doing, like, undead sort of, like, zombie whatevers, but I'm like, this was, even if I haven't watched Game of Thrones, I'm familiar with Game of Thrones. I'm familiar with, so many of these other things that he was just kind of deriving some inspiration from. And I know it's very similar to The Institute in a lot of ways, and the fact that, like, so that was him trying to be like, I'm gonna out Stranger Things, and in this regard, he was, Eyes of the Dragon is so goddamn good, and I adore that book. And, once again, without getting super spoiler, we once again have, like, a, older brother, evil, kind of, although they kind of derive from that, I suppose, and so, like, there is, so, how about I just actually, as opposed to being just emotional, because it's been an interesting day, but just kind of going through its route with Kingisms, I will give it that. And that's probably my favorite aspect about this particular book from King, is that as far as, like, pivotal phrases, ones that will just resonate and that you will think about, it's the predominance of, as I was going through this book, what I was loving. You never know where the trapdoors are in your life, do you? And that's because of the fact that, yeah, Charlie, our lead character, he has a mom that dies very tragically, run over on a bridge, so once again, King going back to the well, so to speak, of personal experience, unfortunately, in that regard. And then, his dad, Charlie's dad, our lead protagonist, he goes into this sort of, like, drinking binge sort of mode, and it's nasty in said regard, but he decides to finally put his best foot forward and try to, sober himself up. And that's really when the story actually takes place, is after that solid footing has been found. And so, props to, Charlie's father and stuff. But yeah, as far as familiar sort of situations of, death and loss and so on, we unfortunately kind of seen this sort of thing before, but, it is all good. And yet, miracles need magic, as King says in this, and it's really, you need to like grease the gears. You need to have somebody who is not only willing but just able, I guess. And so that is really his father becoming a better person. Kind of coincides with, you know, Charlie becoming better himself, and there are so many. Goodness, I'm just kind of laughing to myself because there's so many Easter eggs in this, like major amounts. And so, you know, King is most definitely very fond of sprinkling those through, but he is like hardcore in this, I will admit. So you have everything from Dearborn, you know, Dearborn from the Fourth Dark Tower book. But yeah, you've got a Cujo reference. You have even the fact that it's implied that this was probably Keystone Earth, and the fact that, yeah, Charlie said that his father was fond of saying long days and pleasant nights, and you know, may your days be long upon the earth, and you know, twice your many, and all that different stuff. So yeah, it's almost implied that he had read the Dark Tower, and so, yeah, lots of analysis that you can, you know, potentially just kind of take a peek into, which is really cool. But as far as other interesting aspects, we never know when the turning points come in our relationships with others, big time. And that's because, so I made the Harrigan's phone comparison, but it even goes far beyond that. I mean, it goes back to, you know, Hearts in Atlantis, big time. And the fact that you have this younger kid, and he has this kind of fatherly sort of situation. I guess, like, it was a little bit different with Hearts in Atlantis because of the fact that Garfield, you know, didn't have a father, very similar to King in said regard. And so this is a little bit different, but it's what King experienced, and a well that he continues to go back to, which is, yeah, there is a young / adolescent boy that, you know, strikes up a really just pronounced and prolific friendship with an older, like, grandfatherly type character, and King has done it a ton at this particular point. And I think it was a little bit better developed in Harrigan's Phone. I mean, definitely significantly superior in you know, Hearts in Atlantis, but it was still good here. You know, the standoffish old guy with lots of money, and you know, this is where I'm dancing around, you know, trying to be kindly in the fact that we are in familiar territory, everybody. And I'm not trying to hate, obviously, but the fact that, you know, once again, back to the fact that Revival was like nothing that King, at least for me, really had done previously, and then we get into some of this other stuff more recently, and it just feels familiar. It feels a little less creative. I don't want to use the term like rehash, but I mean, dare I say, a little bit of that, perhaps, possible, maybe. But yet, I think the fact that the writing is so good is what just elevates this. It's what saved me from disliking the Institute. It's what saves me from disliking Fairy Tale. And I do appreciate the fact that it is a celebration of storytelling, specifically. But, you know, once again, I mean, King just embraced, and I don't want to keep just comparing it to, you know, Wolves of the Kala, but yeah, I mean, that was also a similar celebration of things. And so I don't know if the cynicism is just like hitting me significantly hard recently or whatever, but yeah, other interesting aspects. So yes, I've tried not to spoil stuff, but yeah, you've got a younger guy who strikes up a friendship very randomly, and he's trying to fix his, like, his roof or something, and he falls down, and Charlie is kind enough, and I just keep thinking Charlie the Choo-Choo the entire time as I was reading this, and I would imagine that was like kind of a deliberate sort of thing on King's part. But yeah, so a elderly guy injures himself as he's trying to work on his roof, and there is a kind kid who goes and assists him, and they strike up a friendship. But really, even beyond that, I feel like King definitely really solidifies the friendship between Charlie, our main dude, and this dog, which is played by Radar. And so Radar, lots of different like pen names and stuff for said dog. German Shepherd, and the fact that I love German Shepherds so much, and my dad used to train them for the Phoenix Police Department and everything. So yeah, it strikes a chord within me in that regard. So I will at least give a major like nod to the fact that the first like third or so of the book that does deal with this elderly friendship and stuff, they do veer more so in the second and the third act into just a love of an animal, and King with the thing of evil, his beloved little corgi and everything. He's very cute in that regard. But yeah, man, it delves into things a little bit more so after just the familiarity of the old man and young kid sort of friendship, and that's where the story, for better or for worse, FBO, FW, whatever the heck my dad always says, for better or for worse, man, that's where the story goes from what we are very just kind of likened and akin to with regards to King stuff to being drastically different. And drastically different maybe for King, but yet drastically different as far as the storytelling goes. And I don't know, there's interesting aspects after this kid, Charlie, jumps into this other world. And so he is kind of veering around, he's doing this thing, he is, like, his initial intention, without getting super spoilery once again, is the fact that there's a sundial that apparently has a de-aging aspect that has presumably, as he was informed about, helped this guy, I'm trying to remember homie's name at this particular point, Bowditch. Yeah. So Bowditch, the guy who formed this friendship with Charlie, our lead character, and the owner of said dog, as I mentioned, the beloved canine. So he had spent so much friggin' time, man, back in this ulterior world, and he had used this proverbial sundial to kind of turn the clock back a little bit. And so it's presumably been done at least a little bit with the dog, but most notably with Bowditch himself, and the fact that he was able to assume his son's name, and despite the fact that he's well over 100 years old, he he had that sort of pivotal sort of just correlation and everything. So he was well aware of it, and yet just trying to think about this particular story without really going nasty spoilery, because it very much feels like halfway through when the entirety of it is transpiring, and Charlie is there in this other world, and he's doing this thing, getting locked in a dungeon, all this different stuff, being trained for competitive games. I mean, once again, I mentioned Hunger Games, I mentioned George R.R. Martin. There's so much that King implements here that I don't really, it's gonna have to be relegated to the specific spoilery sort of situation. And damn, I'm having the same vibes that I did filming this that I did with Barbarian, with Cecil and Marcia and Robert in that regard, because of the fact that if I really go into the back half of this book, it legitimately is going to divulge way more than is necessary. And it's kind of, I don't want to do that. I don't want to be the culprit, so to speak. And so it's interesting, but I feel like it is way too much an homage, a callback. It's not bad. It's not bad. It is very King in said regard, as I have said countless times, even in this 20-something minutes of discussion. But it, as far as like fresh and new, and isn't unlike anything King has personally done himself, it ranks for sure, but is it, deriving maybe a little bit too much inspiration from other things that I think he respects and holds in high regard? That's unfortunately where, some of my qualms and some of my, it's not a dislike, but it's where I feel like King was most definitely just trying to pepper in, very similar to what he did with that Fifth Dark Tower book. He was trying to give a lot of focus on things that were already out in the sphere, personal commentary about the nature of fairy tales. And I mean, he has very intriguing aspects, most notably where he does actually, as Charlie is doing some research a few different times, he's like, yeah, so many of these fairy tales were far darker in their originally intended form, as opposed to the way that they were like presented for mass consumption, especially in the 20th century. I mean, a phrase that King jumps back to countless times: "I'm not a Disney prince." And I mean, from the Rumpelstiltskin stuff to the Snow White stuff to, I mean, King most definitely is not trying to make something like squeaky clean in said regard, but I don't know. I didn't love this one. I didn't, and I really wanted to. And it was very much like an initial sort of situation where I was enamored initially, and then when it kind of veered into what it was paying homage to, that's where it ironically kind of lost me a little bit. So we will have a much more diverse and distinctive and big time deep dive, if I can unfilter myself, so to speak, in regards to all of that. But yeah, guys, and with 600 pages, it took me a little bit of additional time in comparison with, Elevation and later, which were both like around 200 pages. Like, I can cruise through something like that very quickly. And even so, the fact that the tone changed quite drastically about a third of the way into this book, where there is an incarceration aspect that transpires and a training, and so much of the lore felt familiar. I don't know. But hey, guys, if you love this one, and if I am being unnecessarily critical, which I kind of feel like has been my MO of recent days, not bad, but just did not wow me. And damn, especially with some of the cover art and some of the suggestions, implications, it did not live up to my expectations, unfortunately. But that does not mean that it's bad. I would most definitely, compared to The Institute and Billy Summers, I would recommend the hell out of this one in comparison with those two that I was a little bit more critical of. So, but Fairy Tale, fun, but familiar. And deliberately so, actually, I think, in King's estimation. And so, you can embrace that. You can be cool with, it's like putting on a well-worn-in pair of shoes kind of thing. But that doesn't necessarily, it's not breaking new ground. And nor do I, unfortunately, think that King, with his commentary about the subgenre, was really breaking new ground either. And that's not like a harsh assessment or anything, but that's just, I don't know, the burden of expectation. Cecil always laughs at me for being so fond of that phrase, but it's legitimately a thing. And I think that, aside from Charlie being a great protagonist, I did not necessarily feel as much innovation within this as I was anticipating. So, hey, that is just personal assessment. Maybe upon a second read and listen, things will be drastically different. I will definitely say that I loved the fact that Steve was working with Gabriel, I'm trying to remember the name of homie who assisted with the artistry here. And it is most definitely not listed because it's all about Sai King. But it is an artist who does the chapter preface sort of things, and so very similar to what we had with the Eyes of the Dragon specifically. You have very, very distinctive sorts of bits, which are very cool in said regard. And I am greatly appreciative of the fact that Joe was like, Dad, you need my friend to illustrate this new book of yours. And so, that gave an additional sort of, cinematic sort of semblance, which was cool. But, guys, that is my brief, at this point, non-spoiler thoughts on Fairy Tale. Yeah, it's been a weird day, I must admit. And so, a grande gracias for everybody who has been kind of chilling and tuning in. And shout out to Mike Kearns and Mike's book reviews because of the fact that, yeah, he got his out based on some vacation stuff with said family, and he was able to cruise through this. But, once again, Dan Corey was right in the fact that I needed to not just have a knee-jerk reaction. My knee-jerk reaction might have actually been a little less kind to this, if I'm going to be fair. But once again, listen, read. I'm going to take a different sort of speculation and, just analysis about this. And I'm very much looking forward to a deep dive spoilery discussion where I can talk about, giants and, skeletonly undead zombies and all kinds of craziness that we have within the tome that is this tomb. So, the tomb that is this tome. Hilariously, Fuego, you are just losing all of your cred, sir, but I extend a grande gracias. I've been having Fuego. You can find me on all social media sectors, Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, here on YouTube, and yes, the liking, sharing, subscribing, you guys know how the drill goes here. It is significantly appreciated, and yeah, obviously, give all of the love to Senor El Rey, and yes, until the Wheel of Ka comes around once more. Hasta luego. San amigos, constant readers and viewers alike say thank you. I'm hopeful that we have been well met, and yeah, despite my meanderousness today, that we share more of this palaver sooner rather than later, and until that instance occurs, remember to stay scared, and read Stephen King. Legit. Read Stephen King. Give this one a shot. It's that odd culmination of, familiarity, but yet horror, fantasy, and so many other interesting things all converging.